On a late-night subway, a wealthy businessman stares at his reflection until a poor 7-year-old girl sings a lullaby only his former lover knew. The child has no idea the man watching her with tears is her father. What unfolds will heal wounds a decade in the making. This story will break your heart before putting it back together. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Because tomorrow, I'll be giving you another story just as wild as this one. Now, back to our story. Elias Ward sat perfectly still on the subway bench, his tailored navy suit creating a barrier between him and the worn plastic seat. His Italian leather shoes remained planted firmly despite the train's rhythmic sway. The evening crowd thinned with each stop, carrying away the day's frustrations and tomorrow's worries. But Elias remained, a solitary figure in motion, without purpose. He wasn't heading anywhere specific, not really. His driver had texted twice about picking him up after the board meeting, but he'd dismissed the offer. Something about the anonymity of public transit felt more bearable than returning to the emptiness of his penthouse, even if it meant trading luxury for fluorescent lights and strangers. The air inside the car was stale, tinged with the scent of rain-dampened coats and city grime. Elias's phone vibrated in his pocket, another notification from the empire that consumed his days, but failed to fill his nights. He didn't check it. Instead, his gaze drifted to his reflection in the window. Tired eyes, deepening lines around his mouth, the unmistakable hollowness of a man who had everything and nothing at once. He straightened his cufflinks, a habit born of control rather than vanity. At the next stop, a small figure entered the train with the careful determination of someone carrying precious cargo. She was perhaps 7 years old, brown-skinned with bright eyes and a faded pink dress that hung loosely on her small frame. In one hand, she clutched a grocery bag that seemed too heavy for her size, and in the other, a smaller bag that clinked softly with each movement. She surveyed the half-empty car with solemn consideration before settling into the seat across from Elias. "Are you sad, mister?" she asked, her voice clear and curious above the train's rumble. Elias blinked, caught off guard. "What? You look sad," she said, nodding with the certainty of someone who recognized the emotion well. "Like my mama sometimes, when she thinks I'm sleeping." He raised an eyebrow. "I'm fine." "Okay," she said, apparently unconvinced, but willing to accept his answer. She arranged her bags carefully beside her feet, then looked up at the ceiling as if gathering courage. For a moment, Elias glanced away, hoping to retreat back into his thoughts. But then she began to sing, softly at first, barely audible above the train's mechanical hum. "When shadows fall and night grows cold, I'll be by your side." The melody froze him mid-breath. It wasn't just any song. It was Leah's song, the private lullaby his former lover had written years ago, before ambition tore them apart, before he chose wealth over love, before he knew what true emptiness felt like. Elias gripped the metal pole beside him, steadying himself as the train lurched forward. The girl continued singing, her voice pure and untrained, yet somehow capturing the exact cadence that had once filled his apartment on Sunday mornings. His throat tightened. That melody had never been recorded, never performed outside the walls they once shared. It was a secret language between lovers, one he'd abandoned along with its creator. When the song ended, the few remaining passengers offered scattered applause. The girl smiled, revealing a gap between her front teeth. Something about that smile sent a jolt through Elias's chest, a flash of recognition he couldn't place. "That was beautiful," an elderly woman said from across the aisle. "Did your mama teach you that?" The girl nodded proudly. She wrote it. She says songs are like letters that never get lost. Elias's knuckles whitened around the pole. Leah. It had to be Leah. After 8 years of silence, her melody had found him through this child's voice. The train slowed as it approached the next station. The girl gathered her bags, carefully balancing their weight. When the doors opened, she stepped onto the platform with the determined focus of someone much older. Without conscious decision, Elias followed. Rain had begun to fall, light at first, then heavier as they moved further from the station. The girl didn't seem bothered by it. She navigated the wet sidewalks with practiced ease, occasionally adjusting her grip on the grocery bag. Elias maintained a careful distance, just close enough to keep her pink dress in sight. What was he doing? Following a child through the rain? If anyone saw him, a wealthy man in an expensive suit trailing a young girl, they'd call the police. Yet he couldn't turn back. The song had awakened something dormant, a question that had haunted his dreams for years. What had become of Leah Brooks? The neighborhood transformed with each block. Glass towers gave way to brownstones, which surrendered to apartment buildings with security gates across their windows. The sidewalks narrowed, cracked in places where tree roots pushed through concrete. This was a part of the city Elias hadn't visited in years. Not since the night he'd walked away from the only woman who had ever seen past his ambition to the frightened boy beneath. The girl turned down a side street lined with street lamps that cast pools of amber light onto the wet pavement. She moved with the confidence of routine, shifting her bags to free a hand as she approached a 4-story brick building. The structure was worn but dignified, like someone who had known better days but maintained their pride. The entrance featured a door painted a deep red, the paint chipped at the edges from years of weather and use. The girl climbed 3 steps, set down her bags, and fished a key from her pocket. The door opened before she could use it. "Amira, you're soaked." A woman's voice, warm with concern. "Get inside before you catch cold." The girl, Amira, disappeared into the building, the door closing behind her with a solid thud. Elias stood frozen across the street, rain streaming down his face and neck, soaking through his expensive suit. The voice had been muffled by distance and rain, but he would know it anywhere. Lower than most women's, with a slight rasp that gave it texture. The voice that had once whispered dreams against his skin. Leah. For 5 minutes, Elias remained motionless, rain plastering his hair to his forehead, his mind racing through calculations and possibilities. He should leave. He had no right to disrupt whatever life Leah had built. Yet his feet carried him across the street, up the 3 steps, to stand before the chipped red door. His hand trembled as he raised it to knock. 3 sharp raps against wood. The sound seemed to echo through his bones. Footsteps approached from inside. A lock turned. The door opened. Time collapsed. Leah Brooks stood in the doorway, one hand still on the knob, the other frozen mid-gesture. She wore simple jeans and an oversized sweater that slipped off one shoulder. Her hair was shorter now, cropped close to her head in a style that emphasized her high cheekbones and wide eyes. Those eyes, dark and expressive, widened in shock, then narrowed in disbelief. She was thinner than he remembered, with new lines at the corners of her eyes. But the essence of her remained unchanged. The straight posture of a performer, the slight tilt of her chin that suggested she was always listening for music in the air. Beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with convention, and everything to do with life lived fully. Elias. His name fell from her lips like a stone. Not a question, a statement of fact, heavy with history. Leah. His voice sounded foreign to his own ears, rough with emotion. For a moment they simply stared at each other, the rain creating a curtain between them and the world. 8 years dissolved into nothing. 8 years expanded into an unbridgeable chasm. Her expression hardened first, vulnerability replaced by a protective anger that transformed her features. "What are you doing here?" The warmth he'd heard earlier when she called to Amira was gone, replaced by a cold precision that cut through the rain. Elias faltered. How could he explain following a child? How could he articulate the pull he'd felt when he heard that melody? "I was on the subway. I heard a song." Leah's posture stiffened. "You followed my daughter from the subway?" Her voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "You have no right to be here." "I didn't know she was your daughter," Elias said quickly, though even as the words left his mouth, he realized how obvious it should have been. Not until she started singing. "That song, Leah. Your song." "Our song," she corrected, the words sharp enough to draw blood. "The one you walked away from." The accusation hung between them, as tangible as the rain. Elias had no defense. He had walked away. From the song, from Leah, from the life they might have built together. He'd chosen his family's approval and financial security over love that demanded courage. "I'm sorry," he said, the words inadequate against the weight of years. Leah's laugh was brief and bitter. "Sorry doesn't cover 8 years, Elias." Before he could respond, a voice called from inside the apartment. "Mama, who's at the door?" Something flickered across Leah's face. Concern, perhaps, or fear. She glanced over her shoulder, then back at Elias. For a moment, he thought she might close the door in his face. Instead, she stepped aside. "Come in," she said, her tone making it clear this was not an invitation, but a strategic retreat. "You're dripping all over the hallway." Elias stepped into a narrow entryway. The apartment was small but warm, filled with evidence of a life well lived despite constraints. Colorful artwork adorned the walls, some professional pieces he recognized from their past, others clearly created by a child's hand. A bookshelf overflowed with volumes of poetry, music theory, and children's stories. The furniture was mismatched, but arranged with care. Throw pillows and blankets, adding comfort to utility. It was nothing like his sterile penthouse, with its designer furniture and curated art collection. This was a home. "Mama?" The voice came again, closer now. "Just a minute, baby," Leah called back, her voice transforming into something gentle. She turned to Elias. Dropping her voice, "Wait here." She disappeared around a corner, leaving Elias alone with the sound of rain against windows and his own thundering heartbeat. He heard murmured conversation, then light footsteps retreating. When Leah returned, her expression was guarded. "She's going to change into dry clothes." "Leah, why are you really here, Elias?" She crossed her arms over her chest. 8 years of silence, and suddenly you follow my daughter home? What do you want? The question hung between them. What did he want? He hadn't planned this, hadn't even known Leah was still in New York. "I heard the song," he said finally. "I never thought I'd hear it again. It was like being struck by lightning. I had to know how she knew it." "So you followed a child through the rain, instead of, I don't know, minding your own business?" Leah's voice was sharp, but beneath the anger, he heard fear. "I know how it sounds," he admitted. "I wasn't thinking clearly." "You never did when it mattered," she said quietly. Before he could respond, a blur of pink rushed into the room. Amira, now wearing dry clothes, a faded t-shirt with a cartoon character he didn't recognize, and leggings with stars on them. Her hair was wrapped in a colorful scarf. "Mama, I sold 3 drawings today. Mr. Wilson bought the one with the birds, and a lady on the train gave me $5 for the small one with the buildings and—" She stopped abruptly, noticing Elias. Her eyes widened with recognition. "Hey, you're the sad man from the train." Leah's gaze darted between them. "You two met?" "On the subway," Amira said matter-of-factly. "He looked sad, so I sang to him, like you do for me when I'm sad." Something in Elias's chest constricted. He looked at the child, really looked at her, and felt the world shift beneath his feet. Her eyes were a deep brown, wide, and expressive like Leah's, but their shape, the slight upward tilt at the corners. That was his mother's feature. His feature. And the gap between her front teeth. He'd had the same until orthodontics at 13. Leah must have seen the realization dawning on his face. She placed a protective hand on Amira's shoulder. "Baby, why don't you go set up your drawings in your room? I want to see everything you sold today." "Can I show him too?" Amira asked, pointing at Elias. A complicated emotion passed over Leah's face. "Not tonight, sweetheart. Mr. She hesitated. "Ward," Elias supplied automatically. "Elias Ward." "Mr. Ward won't be staying long," Leah finished. Amira looked disappointed, but nodded. "Okay. Nice to meet you, Mr. Ward." She extended her small hand with surprising formality. Elias shook it gently, overwhelmed by the smallness of her fingers in his palm. "Nice to meet you too, Amira." She beamed at him, then skipped down the hallway. The sound of a door closing followed. Silence expanded between the adults, heavy with unspoken questions. Elias couldn't tear his eyes away from the hallway where Amira had disappeared. "How old is she?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. The math was simple, devastating. 7, Leah said, her voice carefully neutral. "She'll be 8 in November." 8 years since he'd walked away. 7 years and change since Amira was born. The timeline left no room for doubt. "Is she—" He couldn't finish the question. Leah's eyes met his, unflinching. "Yes." 1 word, 3 letters, a truth that rewrote everything. "Why didn't you tell me?" The question emerged as a whisper. "Tell you?" Leah's laugh was hollow. "You made your choice, Elias. You chose your family's money and approval over us, over me. You said, and I quote, 'This isn't going anywhere.' We both knew that. Then you walked out and never looked back. I didn't know you were pregnant. Neither did I, at the time." She ran a hand over her cropped hair. "I found out 3 weeks later. I called you." Elias frowned. "I never got a call." "I called your office. Your assistant said you were unavailable. I left a message asking you to call me back. You never did." Leah's voice was flat, reciting history without emotion. "I called again a week later. Same response. After the 3rd try, I got the message." Shame washed over him. He remembered those weeks, burying himself in work, instructing his assistant to screen all calls, especially from Leah. He'd been a coward, unable to face the pain he'd caused. "I would have—" "What?" Leah cut him off. "You would have what, Elias? Sent money? Insisted I get rid of it? Or maybe you would have played weekend father when it was convenient. Which version of revisionist history are we writing tonight?" Her words struck with precision. He had no answer that wasn't tainted by who he'd been then. Ambitious, selfish, desperate for his parents' approval. She doesn't know, Leah said quietly, nodding toward the hallway. She doesn't know about you. The words landed like a physical blow. Of course she didn't know. How could she? To her, he was just a sad stranger on a train. What have you told her? He asked. That her father loved us, but couldn't be with us. Leah's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. I refused to make her feel unwanted. She has enough challenges in this world without carrying that weight too. Elias felt something crack inside him. The protective shell he'd built around his heart after walking away from Leah. He looked around the small apartment, taking in the evidence of their life together. School artwork taped to the refrigerator, a child-sized keyboard in the corner, medical bills partially hidden under a book on the coffee table. I should go, he said finally, though everything in him wanted to stay, to learn more about the daughter he never knew existed. Leah nodded, relief and something like disappointment mingling in her expression. She walked to the door and opened it. The rain had stopped, leaving the night air clean and cool. This changes nothing, she said as he stepped past her. She's happy. We're doing fine. But they both knew it changed everything. Leah, he said, turning back. The song. Why did you teach it to her? A sad smile touched her lips. I didn't teach it to her for you. I taught it to her for her. It's still a beautiful melody, even if the story behind it wasn't. Elias nodded, unable to find words adequate for the moment. As he descended the steps, Leah's voice stopped him. Elias. He turned. She stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the warm light behind her. She doesn't know, and I need time to figure out if she should. The door closed before he could respond, leaving him alone on the wet sidewalk, drenched in rain and memory. His world irrevocably altered by a song and the child who sang it. Elias didn't remember the walk back to his penthouse. His body moved on autopilot, while his mind replayed the evening's revelations on an endless loop. By the time he stepped into his sleek, silent home, his clothes were still damp, his shoes ruined. He didn't care. He walked straight to the bar, poured 3 fingers of scotch, and drank it in one burning swallow. A daughter. He had a daughter. He poured another drink and carried it to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the glittering city. From 38 floors up, New York looked orderly, manageable. Nothing like the messy human drama unfolding in his chest. The scotch couldn't dull the memories that surfaced now, sharp and vivid as if they'd happened yesterday instead of 8 years ago. He'd met Leah at a charity event where she was performing. 29 years old then, he was already making his mark in finance, hungry for success and his parents' approval. She was 26 with a voice that silenced rooms and eyes that saw through pretense. He'd approached her after her set, intending to offer a practiced compliment before moving on to more strategic networking. Instead, they'd talked until the venue staff began stacking chairs around them. Leah Brooks was unlike anyone in his carefully curated social circle. A jazz singer from Harlem, with a music degree from Juilliard, and a laugh that made strangers turn and smile. She lived in a cramped apartment with 2 roommates, taught music to children in underserved schools, and spoke about art and justice with equal passion. When she looked at him, she didn't see Elias Ward, heir to the Ward financial legacy. She saw just Elias, the man beneath the tailored suits and family expectations. For 6 months, they existed in a world of their own making. Weeknight dinners at hole-in-the-wall restaurants, where the food was extraordinary and the tablecloths non-existent. Sunday mornings tangled in sheets while she composed songs on his piano, wearing nothing but one of his dress shirts. Late-night walks through the city, planning futures that seemed possible in the darkness. Then his parents found out. The memory of that day still made his stomach clench. His father's study, the heavy scent of leather and cigars, his mother's carefully arranged expression of concern. "This has gone on long enough, Elias," his father had said, not looking up from the background check he'd ordered on Leah. "She's a lovely diversion, I'm sure. But it's time to think about your future. The firm's future." "I am thinking about my future," he'd argued. "Leah is part of it." His mother's laugh had been gentle but dismissive. "Darling, be realistic. You're a ward. She's a performer from Harlem. Different worlds entirely. That's what I like about her. She's real." "Real doesn't build empires," his father had countered. "Real doesn't maintain the relationships we need to succeed. Do you think our clients will take you seriously, with her on your arm, at functions? Do you think the board will vote you in as my successor if they see you can't make rational decisions? This isn't about rationality. It's about love." The word had hung in the air, foreign and uncomfortable in that room of calculated decisions. His father had sighed, removing his glasses. "Then let me be perfectly clear. Marry her, and you lose everything. Your position at the firm, your trust fund, your inheritance, your name. You can't be serious. Try me." His father's eyes had been cold, determined. "I built this legacy from nothing. I won't watch you throw it away on a girl who sings in bars." Elias had walked out furious, determined to choose love over money. But in the following days, doubt crept in. He'd been raised to believe in the ward legacy, to see himself as its guardian. Who was he without it? What could he offer Leah without his family's resources? And somewhere deeper, uglier. Would she still want him if he was just another struggling professional instead of Elias Ward? A week later, he'd ended things in her apartment, delivering practiced lines about different paths and incompatible futures. He'd avoided her eyes, knowing he'd lose his resolve if he saw the hurt there. He'd walked out, telling himself it was the rational choice, the adult decision. She had vanished from his life after that. He'd heard she'd left New York, then later that she'd returned. He never sought her out, burying himself in work and the hollow satisfaction of his parents' approval. And now, 8 years later, he stood in his multi-million-dollar penthouse, realizing what his rational choice had truly cost him. Morning found him at his desk, eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. He'd spent the night alternating between denial and desperate hope. Amira couldn't be his daughter. The timing was suspicious, yes, but coincidences happened. Leah could be mistaken, or lying. Yet every time he closed his eyes, he saw Amira's smile, that gap between her front teeth, the same one that had marked his childhood photos. He saw the shape of her eyes, the tilt at the corners that mirrored his own. He heard her voice, singing the melody that had once been a secret language between him and Leah. He needed to know for certain, not just for his peace of mind, but because if Amira was truly his daughter, he had responsibilities, rights, a chance to be the father his own had never been. 3 days passed before he found the courage to return to the Red Door. This time, he arrived bearing gifts, a pretext for his visit, a children's art set for Amira, expensive coffee for Leah, the kind she used to love but could rarely afford. Leah's expression when she opened the door was guarded, but not hostile. Progress, of sorts. "What are you doing here, Elias?" He held up the packages. "Peace offerings. May I come in?" She hesitated, then stepped aside. The apartment was quieter today, sunlight streaming through windows, that had been dark during his last visit. "Amira's at school," Leah said, anticipating his question. "She won't be home for hours." "That's fine. I actually wanted to talk to you." He set the packages on the coffee table. "I've been thinking about what you told me. And I want to help, Leah. Financially, I mean." He gestured around the apartment. "You're raising Amira on your own. That can't be easy." Her posture stiffened. "We're managing just fine." "The medical bills on your coffee table suggest otherwise." "Those are none of your business." She crossed her arms. "We don't need your money, Elias." "We never have. Everyone needs money. What we needed was you, 8 years ago." She shook her head. "But that ship has sailed. Amira and I have built a life without you. A good one." "I can see that," he said, and meant it. Despite the apartment's modest size and obvious budget constraints, it radiated warmth and love in a way his sterile penthouse never would. "But I could make things easier. Tuition for a better school, a larger apartment, medical insurance." "Stop." Leah's voice was sharp. "You don't get to waltz back in here and play savior. Money doesn't fix this, Elias." "Then what does?" he asked, genuine desperation in his voice. She studied him for a long moment. "Nothing fixes it. We just move forward from here, carefully, for Amira's sake." He nodded, accepting this small concession. "May I use your bathroom?" "Down the hall, first door on the left." As he walked down the narrow hallway, he passed what was clearly Amira's room. The door was ajar, revealing walls covered in artwork, a small bed with a colorful quilt, and a dresser cluttered with the treasures of childhood. On top sat a hairbrush, several strands of dark hair caught in its bristles. Elias glanced back toward the living room, then quickly slipped into Amira's room. He felt like a thief as he carefully extracted a single strand of hair from the brush and tucked it into his pocket. The violation made his stomach turn, but he needed to know, needed proof that couldn't be denied or explained away. He used the bathroom as promised, then returned to the living room where Leah waited, her expression suggesting she knew something had shifted. "I should go," he said. "But I'd like to come back, to get to know Amira if you'll allow it." "I need time to think about that," Leah replied. "This isn't just about you and me anymore." He nodded, understanding. As he left, the weight of the single strand of hair in his pocket felt heavier than it should. Back in his office, Elias made a call to a private laboratory that handled discrete testing for wealthy clients. No questions asked, expedited results, absolute confidentiality. He provided his own sample, a cheek swab, and the strand of Amira's hair. The technician assured him they would have results within 48 hours. For 2 days, Elias moved through his life like a ghost. He attended meetings without hearing what was said. He signed documents without reading them. He ate without tasting food. His mind remained fixed on a small apartment with a red door and the child who might be his daughter. What would he do if the test confirmed his suspicions? What place could he claim in Amira's life after 8 years of absence? Did he even deserve one? On the morning of the 3rd day, his assistant entered his office carrying a sealed envelope. "This just arrived by courier, Mr. Ward, marked urgent and confidential." Elias stared at the envelope after she left, afraid to open it, yet unable to ignore it. Finally, he broke the seal and removed a single sheet of paper. Paternity test results, Subject A, Elias James Ward. Subject B, unknown female child. Probability of paternity, 99.9%. Conclusion: Subject A cannot be excluded as the biological father of Subject B. The clinical language couldn't disguise the emotional weight of the conclusion. Elias read the results 3 times, each review cementing the truth he'd both feared and hoped for. Amira was his daughter. He sank back in his chair, the paper trembling in his hands. A strange sound escaped his throat, half laugh, half sob. He had a child, a beautiful, bright, talented child who sang her mother's songs on subway trains and sold drawings to strangers. A child who had lived 7 years without knowing her father's name. The initial shock gave way to a wave of emotions so intense he could barely breathe. Joy at the confirmation of what he'd suspected. Grief for the years he'd lost. Rage at himself for walking away. Fear that it was too late to build any meaningful relationship. And beneath it all, a fierce, protective love he'd never experienced before. Instinctive and overwhelming. He needed to see Leah. Needed to show her the proof and make her understand that everything had changed. He was no longer the coward who had walked away 8 years ago. He would not abandon his daughter again. That evening he stood once again before the red door, the test results folded in his pocket. His knock was firmer this time, confident in the truth he carried. Leah opened the door wearing paint-splattered jeans and a faded t-shirt, her expression shifting from surprise to wariness when she saw him. "Twice in 1 week," she said. "Should I be concerned? We need to talk." His voice was steady despite the storm inside him. "May I come in?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Amira's at her music lesson. She won't be back for an hour." The apartment smelled of fresh paint and coffee. An easel stood in the corner of the living room, a half-finished canvas, revealing the beginnings of what looked like a city skyline at sunset. "You're painting again," Elias observed. In their time together, Leah had often talked about returning to visual art, a passion she'd set aside for music. "I teach art classes now, alongside music," she said. "It helps pay the bills." He nodded, unsure how to transition to the real purpose of his visit. Finally, he simply reached into his pocket and withdrew the folded paper. "What's that?" Leah asked, though her tone suggested she already knew. "Confirmation," he said, holding it out to her. She didn't take it. "You had her tested? Without my permission?" The accusation in her voice made him wince. "I needed to know for certain." "So you stole her hair? Invaded her privacy? Our privacy?" Leah's voice rose slightly. "You couldn't just take my word for it? Would you have taken mine in my position?" "I wouldn't have been in your position," she shot back. "I wouldn't have walked away in the first place." The truth of that statement hung between them. Elias set the paper on the coffee table. "You're right. What I did was wrong. But I needed to be sure before I—" He trailed off. "Before you what?" Leah challenged. "Swooped in with your money and your guilt? Disrupted the life we've built? Before I committed to being her father," he finished quietly. Leah stared at him for a long moment, then snatched up the paper. Her eyes scanned the results, her expression unreadable. When she looked up, her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "You bought proof of what you could have had for free, if you'd just stayed." She slapped the paper back onto the table. "Congratulations, Elias. Science confirms what I've known for 7 years. What does that change exactly?" "Everything," he said. "It changes everything." "For you, maybe." Leah crossed her arms. "You get to have your big revelation, your dramatic moment of truth. But for us, nothing changes. Amira still grew up without you. I still raised her alone. We still built a life that doesn't include Elias Ward and his family fortune. I want to be part of her life now," he insisted. "I want to make up for lost time. Time doesn't work that way." You can't buy back 7 years with expensive gifts and private schools. Then what can I do? The question burst from him, raw and desperate. Tell me, Leah, what can I possibly do to make this right? She looked at him with eyes that had once looked at him with love, now filled with a complex mixture of anger, pity, and exhaustion. Nothing makes it right, Elias. Nothing erases what happened. She sighed, some of the fight leaving her. But if you're serious about being in her life, truly serious, not just assuaging your guilt, then we start slow, very slow, and Amira's needs come first, always. Of course, he agreed quickly. Whatever you think is best. What I think, Leah said, her voice hardening again, is that she already has a parent. She has a father, me. I've been both mother and father to her since the day she was born. You're a visitor, and visitors need to earn their welcome. The words stung, but Elias recognized their truth. He had no right to waltz back into their lives and claim a role he'd abandoned years ago. If he wanted to be Amira's father, he would have to earn it. One day, one gesture, one proof of commitment at a time. I understand, he said softly, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Leah studied him, searching for sincerity or its absence. Whatever she saw made her nod slowly. We'll see, she said, neither promise nor rejection. We'll see. 2 weeks passed with careful, measured interactions. Elias visited 3 times, always bringing small, thoughtful gifts. Art supplies for Amira, sheet music for Leah, groceries that mysteriously appeared on their doorstep. He was trying, in the only ways he knew how, to bridge the chasm his absence had created. During these visits, he and Amira built a tentative rapport. She showed him her drawings, performed songs she was learning, and peppered him with questions about his life. To her, he was still just Mr. Ward, her mother's friend, a man who looked sad on the subway and now smiled when she sang. Elias treasured these moments, while carrying the weight of the truth they couldn't yet share. Leah watched their interactions with guarded eyes, maintaining a careful distance. She allowed these visits, but kept firm boundaries, always during daylight hours, never longer than 2 hours, and she was always present. The terms of his re-entry into their lives were non-negotiable, until the day they weren't. It began with a school form. Amira needed her father's medical history for a health screening. Leah had always left these sections blank, but now, with Elias in their lives, the empty spaces felt like unnecessary lies. I need your family medical history, she said when Amira was in her room, out of earshot. She handed him the form, her expression neutral. Elias took it, surprised by this small concession. Of course. This doesn't mean I'm telling her yet, Leah clarified. It's just for her records. I understand. He studied the form. My mother had breast cancer. Survived it. My father has hypertension. My grandfather died of a heart attack at 62. Leah nodded, making notes. Anything else? I had asthma as a child, grew out of it mostly. He hesitated. When are you planning to tell her? The question hung between them, heavier than it should have been. Leah's jaw tightened. I don't know, Elias. When I'm convinced you're not going to disappear again the moment things get difficult. I won't, he said firmly. I'm here for good. You said that 8 years ago too. She took the form back. Actions, not words. What more can I do to prove it to you? Frustration edged into his voice. I've respected your boundaries. I've shown up consistently. I've thrown money at the problem, she finished for him. That's your solution for everything, isn't it? Expensive art supplies. Gourmet groceries. I found the envelope you slipped into my coat pocket. $5,000? Really? Elias flushed. I was trying to help. No, you were trying to buy forgiveness. Leah's voice rose slightly. You think you can just write a check and erase 8 years of absence? Pay your way out of the nights she cried asking why she didn't have a daddy like other kids? Money doesn't fix this, Elias. Then what does? He demanded, his own frustration boiling over. Tell me what to do, Leah. Because I'm trying everything I know, and nothing seems to be enough for you. This isn't about me. Her eyes flashed. This is about Amira. About making sure she doesn't get hurt when you inevitably decide that playing weekend father is too inconvenient for your lifestyle. That's not fair, he said, his voice low and tight. You don't know what I want. I know exactly what you want, she countered. You want to ease your guilt. You want to play the hero. You want to feel better about walking out on us. I didn't know about her when I left. Would it have made a difference? The question cut through his defense. If I had told you I was pregnant that day, would you have stayed? The truth stuck in his throat. He didn't know. He wanted to believe he would have made a different choice. But the man he'd been then, ambitious, eager for his parents' approval, might still have walked away, perhaps with a check and promises to provide financially. His silence was answer enough for Leah. That's what I thought, she said quietly. Love isn't a press release, Elias. You can't just announce your intentions and expect everyone to fall in line with your narrative. I'm not the same man who left, he insisted. People change. Prove it, she challenged. Not with money, not with gifts, with sacrifice, with consistency when it's hard, not just when it's convenient. Before he could respond, Amira bounded into the room, clutching a drawing. Look what I made for you, Mr. E. The shift was immediate. Leah's expression softened, the anger carefully tucked away. Elias forced a smile, accepting the colorful portrait Amira had created. A man in a suit standing beside a small girl, both holding what appeared to be ice cream cones. It's us at the park, she explained proudly, for when you take me, like you promised. Elias glanced at Leah, whose tight expression made it clear this was the first she'd heard of such a promise. It's beautiful, he told Amira. I'll keep it on my desk at work. Later, as he prepared to leave, Leah walked him to the door. Don't make promises to her that you can't keep, she warned, her voice low. Not the park, not anything. I meant it, he insisted. I want to take her to the park. With my permission, she reminded him. And I haven't given it yet. He nodded stiffly. I'll earn it. We'll see, she said, closing the door between them. 3 days later, Elias's phone rang at 9:47 p.m. Amira's small voice came through, trembling and afraid. Mr. E, Mama fell down and she won't wake up. His heart stopped. Where are you, Amira? Home. Mama was making dinner, and then she just... Her voice broke. I'm scared. I'm coming right now, he said, already grabbing his keys. Stay on the phone with me. Is your mom breathing? Yes, Amira said after a moment, but she looks really pale. Did you call 911? I tried, but I got confused with the questions they asked. That's okay, I'll call them. You stay with your mom, okay? I'll be there in 10 minutes. He made it in 7, breaking several traffic laws along the way. The door to the apartment was unlocked. Inside, he found Leah unconscious on the kitchen floor, Amira kneeling beside her, tears streaming down her face. A pot of pasta had boiled over on the stove, water hissing against the burner. I turned off the stove, Amira said, her voice small. Like Mama taught me for emergencies. Good girl, Elias said, kneeling to check Leah's pulse. It was there but weaker than it should be. Her skin was clammy, her breathing shallow. The ambulance is on its way. He gathered Leah into his arms, cradling her head. Leah, can you hear me? Her eyelids fluttered, but didn't open. The paramedics arrived minutes later, efficiently assessing Leah's condition before loading her onto a stretcher. Elias lifted Amira into his arms. We're going with her, he told the paramedic. This is her daughter. At the hospital, they were directed to a waiting room while doctors examined Leah. Amira sat beside Elias, her small hand clutching his, her eyes fixed on the double doors through which they'd taken her mother. Is Mama going to die? She asked, her voice barely audible. The question pierced him. No, sweetheart. Your mom is very strong. She's just sick and needs some help from the doctors. She's been tired a lot, Amira confided, and sometimes she doesn't eat dinner so I can have more. The simple statement hit Elias like a physical blow. While he'd been living in luxury, Leah had been skipping meals to feed their daughter. A doctor finally emerged, clipboard in hand. Family of Leah Brooks? Elias stood, Amira still holding his hand. Yes. The doctor glanced at Amira, then spoke carefully. Ms. Brooks is stable. She's suffering from severe anemia, exhaustion, and malnutrition. Her body essentially shut down from overwork and lack of proper care. Has she been under unusual stress lately? Guilt twisted in Elias's stomach. His reappearance in their lives, the emotional toll of their arguments, the constant strain of raising a child alone while working multiple jobs. Yes, he said simply. Will she be all right? With proper rest and treatment, yes. We're giving her fluids and iron now. She'll need to stay overnight for observation, possibly longer. Can I see my mama? Amira asked, her voice small but determined. The doctor smiled kindly. In a little while, sweetheart. She's sleeping now. After the doctor left, Elias knelt before Amira. Your mom is going to be okay, but she needs to rest in the hospital tonight. Is there someone you usually stay with when your mom is working? A neighbor or friend? Amira shook her head. Mama doesn't leave me alone. She takes me with her or works when I'm at school. Another revelation that twisted the knife of guilt deeper. Leah had been carrying this burden entirely alone. Then you'll stay with me tonight, he decided. If that's okay with you? Amira studied him with solemn eyes that seemed too old for her face. Will you bring me back to see Mama in the morning? First thing, he promised. She nodded, accepting this arrangement with the resilience of a child who had already learned that life sometimes required flexibility. They were allowed a brief visit before leaving. Leah looked small in the hospital bed, an IV in her arm, her skin ashen against the white sheets. She was awake, but groggy, her eyes widening with concern when she saw Amira. Hey, baby, she said, her voice weak. I'm sorry I scared you. Amira climbed carefully onto the edge of the bed and took her mother's hand. The doctor said you need to rest. I will, Leah promised, then noticed Elias standing behind their daughter. A question formed in her eyes. Amira's going to stay with me tonight, he said quietly. We'll be back in the morning. Leah looked like she wanted to protest, but lacked the strength. Instead, she nodded slightly. Be good for Mr. Ward, she told Amira, kissing her forehead. I will, Mama. I'll bring your favorite tea tomorrow. In the taxi to his penthouse, Amira sat quietly, taking in the unfamiliar neighborhoods as they passed from her world to his. The doorman greeted them with professional courtesy, though Elias caught the surprise in his eyes at the sight of a child accompanying him. Inside the apartment, Amira's eyes widened at the expansive space, the floor-to-ceiling windows, the minimalist furniture that spoke of wealth and isolation. "Where are all your things?" she asked, looking around the pristine living room. "What do you mean?" "Your drawings and books and stuff." She gestured vaguely. "It looks like nobody lives here." The observation was painfully accurate. His home contained no personal touches, no evidence of a life fully lived. It was a place to sleep and shower between workdays, not a home where memories were made. "I don't have many things," he admitted. "Not like you and your mom." Amira nodded sagely. "That's why you looked sad on the train." The simple insight from a 7-year-old struck deeper than any therapist's analysis. He was sad, had been for years without fully acknowledging it. Sad and empty in his perfect, sterile life. He prepared the guest room for her, realizing too late he had nothing suitable for a child. No toys, no books, not even appropriate food in his refrigerator. He ordered delivery while Amira explored the apartment, her curiosity temporarily overriding her worry about her mother. After a dinner of pizza eaten at his rarely used dining table, Elias faced the challenge of bedtime. He had no idea what Amira's routine might be. "What does your mom usually do when it's time for bed?" he asked. "She reads me a story and then sings our special song," Amira said, as if this were universal knowledge. "I don't have any children's books," he admitted, "but maybe we could find something on my tablet." They settled on an illustrated story he downloaded, and Elias found himself reading about a brave princess who saved her kingdom with kindness rather than weapons. Amira listened intently, occasionally correcting his inflection when he didn't read a character's voice properly. When the story ended, she looked at him expectantly. "Now the song." Elias hesitated. "I don't know if I know the right one." "It's the one I sang on the train," she said, "by your side." His throat tightened. Of course it was. The lullaby Leah had written years ago had become their daughter's bedtime ritual. "I don't sing very well," he warned. "That's okay. Mama says it's not about being perfect. It's about meaning it." Another lesson from Leah that cut to the heart of what mattered. Elias cleared his throat and began to sing softly, the melody coming back to him as if it had been waiting just beneath the surface of his memory. Amira joined in, her clear voice guiding him through forgotten lyrics. When the song ended, she smiled sleepily. "You did good, Mr. E." "Thank you," he whispered, emotion thick in his throat. "Sleep well, Amira." He stayed beside her until her breathing deepened into sleep, watching the rise and fall of her small chest, marveling at the miracle of her existence. This child, his child, had been in the world for 7 years without him. The weight of that lost time pressed on him, along with the sudden fierce determination never to miss another day. The next 3 days established a new pattern. Leah remained in the hospital, her body requiring more recovery time than initially expected. Elias took leave from work, something he'd never done for personal reasons, to care for Amira and visit Leah daily. He brought Amira to school each morning, picked her up each afternoon, helped with homework, prepared meals, and maintained as much normalcy as possible. In Leah's apartment, he discovered the full extent of her financial struggles. Past due notices hidden in drawers. Medical bills with payment plans stretched to their limits. A calendar marked with multiple jobs, music lessons, art classes, night shifts at a jazz club. How had she managed it all alone? The question haunted him as he cooked in her small kitchen, as he helped Amira with her math homework, as he learned the rhythms of the life he'd been absent from. On the 4th evening, he sat with Leah in her hospital room, while Amira charmed the nurses at the station outside. "The doctor says you can come home tomorrow," he told her. "But you need 2 weeks of complete rest. No work." Leah's laugh was bitter. "That's not possible. I have bills, Elias. Rent. Amira's school fees." "I'll cover everything," he said immediately. "No." Her response was firm despite her weakened state. "I don't want your money." "This isn't about what you want," he countered, surprising himself with his firmness. "It's about what Amira needs, and she needs her mother healthy." Leah looked away, tears of frustration gathering in her eyes. "You don't understand what it's been like. Year after year, doing it all alone, never having a safety net, never having someone to share the burden with." "You're right," he admitted quietly. "I don't understand. I can't imagine how hard it's been. But I'm here now, and I want to help. Not to ease my guilt or to buy forgiveness, because it's what fathers do. They provide for their families." The word father hung between them, charged with meaning. "She's getting attached to you," Leah said after a moment. "She talks about you constantly. Is that a bad thing?" "It's terrifying," she confessed. "What if you leave again?" The question was fair, deserved. Elias leaned forward, meeting her gaze directly. "I won't," he promised. "I know my word doesn't mean much to you right now, but I'm going to prove it. Every day. For as long as it takes." She studied him, searching for sincerity. "We'll see." When they brought Leah home the next day, Elias had already prepared the apartment, stocked the refrigerator, filled prescriptions, arranged the bedroom for maximum comfort. He'd hired a cleaning service and had fresh flowers delivered. Small gestures that couldn't erase the past, but might ease the present. "You don't have to stay," Leah told him, as he settled her on the couch with a blanket and tea. "I know," he said simply, "but I want to." Days passed in a new domestic rhythm. Elias worked remotely from Leah's small kitchen table, taking calls between preparing meals and helping Amira with homework. He learned how to braid Amira's hair, poorly at first, then with increasing skill. How to check her schoolwork, how to soothe her nightmares. He discovered her favorite foods, her fears, her remarkable talent for drawing that mirrored her mother's artistic eye. Leah watched this transformation from her position of enforced rest, her expression shifting gradually from suspicion to cautious appreciation. The man who moved through her apartment with growing confidence was not the same one who had walked away 8 years ago. This Elias laughed more easily, listened more carefully, and seemed to find joy in the simple acts of care that defined parenthood. One night, after a particularly exhausting day, Elias and Amira curled up on the couch to watch a movie. He had intended to return to his penthouse once Leah was asleep, as he had each night. But the warmth of Amira against his side, her small head eventually dropping onto his shoulder as she drifted off, kept him still. He didn't want to disturb her, didn't want to break this moment of trust and connection. He must have fallen asleep himself, because the next thing he knew, weak morning light was filtering through the windows. Amira was still curled against him, her breathing deep and even, one small hand clutching his shirt. His arm rested protectively around her shoulders, holding her secure, even in sleep. He looked up to find Leah standing in the hallway, watching them. She wore a robe over her pajamas, her short hair tousled from sleep. Something in her expression had shifted, the wariness replaced by something softer, more contemplative. Their eyes met over the head of their sleeping daughter. No words were needed. The message in Leah's gaze was clear. The man who had left was not the one standing before her now. And perhaps, just perhaps, there was room in their carefully constructed life for this new version of Elias Ward. Spring arrived in New York with tentative warmth, much like the fragile new connections forming in the apartment with the red door. As Leah recovered her strength, Elias remained a constant presence, no longer just a visitor but not quite family, existing in that undefined space between stranger and belonging. The first sign of true change came when the bathroom sink began leaking. Leah mentioned it casually over breakfast, adding it to her mental list of things to handle once she was fully recovered. By that afternoon, Elias had appeared with tools and supplies, his Italian suit replaced by jeans and a faded Harvard t-shirt. "You don't have to do that," Leah said, watching him kneel on the bathroom floor. "I know," he replied, the phrase that had become his mantra. "But I want to." It became a pattern. The flickering hallway light was replaced. The stubborn window that wouldn't open was fixed. The kitchen cabinets that had hung crooked for years were carefully realigned. Small repairs that Leah had learned to live with disappeared one by one under Elias's determined hands. He never mentioned the envelope he slipped to the landlord, covering 3 months of rent in advance. Never drew attention to the groceries that appeared regularly, or the new winter coat that fit Amira perfectly, or the music lessons he quietly arranged with a respected teacher from Juilliard who owed him a favor. His help came without fanfare or expectation of gratitude, a stark contrast to the man who had once believed money alone could solve any problem. The most significant change, however, was in his calendar. The man who had once scheduled his life in 15-minute increments now rearranged board meetings to attend Amira's school science fair. Conference calls were conducted in hushed tones from his car while parked outside her dance class. A crucial investor dinner was delegated to his CFO because it conflicted with Amira's first piano recital. "You're going to lose clients," Leah observed one evening as she watched him help Amira with a social studies project, his phone buzzing with ignored calls. "I'll find new ones," he said, without looking up from the diorama they were constructing. "This is more important." And he meant it. The revelation had come to him gradually over these weeks. The empire he'd spent a decade building meant nothing compared to the small moments he was now experiencing. Amira's gap-toothed smile when she mastered a difficult piano piece, her serious concentration as she explained her artwork, the weight of her small hand in his as they walked to school. One night, after Amira had gone to bed, he found Leah sitting alone on the fire escape, a rare glass of wine in her hand, staring at the city lights. "May I join you?" he asked. She nodded, making room on the narrow metal landing. For a while, they sat in comfortable silence, the kind that had once been natural between them years ago. "Thank you," she said finally, "for everything you've been doing." "You don't need to thank me for being a decent human being," he replied. "I should have been doing it all along." She turned to look at him, her expression thoughtful. "Why are you really here, Elias? Day after day, fixing things, helping with homework, singing lullabies. What do you want from us?" The question wasn't accusatory, just honest. A request for truth between two people who had once shared everything. "I want to be her father," he said simply. "And I want—" He hesitated, uncertain if he had the right to voice the rest of his desire. "What?" Leah pressed. "I want us to be a family," he admitted, "in whatever way that's possible. I know I have no right to ask for that. I know I forfeited that chance years ago. But being here, with both of you, it's the first time in 8 years that anything has felt real." Leah looked away, her fingers tightening around the wine glass. "I'm scared, Elias." "Of me?" The possibility pained him. "No," she said, shaking her head. of trusting again, of letting you into our lives completely, and then watching you leave when it gets hard. Because it will get hard. Parenting isn't just science projects and piano recitals. It's tantrums and illnesses and teenage rebellion and 1,000 moments where you have to choose your child over everything else. I know, he said, and I'm ready for all of it. How can you be sure? You've only seen the good parts so far. He considered this, wanting to give her honesty rather than easy reassurance. I can't be completely sure. I've never been a father before. But I know that even on the hardest days here, when Amira was upset about her math test, when she had that nightmare and wouldn't stop crying, I never once thought about leaving. I only thought about how to help. Leah studied him, searching for truth in his words. She asks about you when you're not here, wants to know when you're coming back. She's starting to depend on you. Is that a bad thing? It's terrifying, Leah admitted. For 7 years, it's been just us. I've been her everything. Mother, father, best friend, teacher. I don't know how to share that role. I'm not trying to replace you, Elias said gently. I couldn't, even if I wanted to. You've been extraordinary with her. A small smile touched Leah's lips. She is pretty amazing, isn't she? She's perfect, he agreed, and she deserves to have both of us in her life. You don't owe me forgiveness, Leah. You don't owe me anything. But she deserves a whole family, if we can give her that. Leah didn't respond immediately, letting his words settle between them. The city hummed below, indifferent to their private reckoning. I'm not ready to tell her yet, she said finally, about you being her father. I understand. We'll do it when you're ready. She nodded, then surprised him by asking, would you like to stay for dinner tomorrow? Just the 3 of us. The invitation, simple as it was, felt monumental. I'd like that very much. The following evening, Elias arrived with flowers, daisies for Amira, who had declared them her favorite, and a mixed bouquet for Leah that carefully avoided roses or anything too romantic. He'd changed clothes 3 times before settling on casual slacks and a blue button-down shirt, wanting to look presentable but not formal. Amira answered the door, bouncing with excitement. Mr. E, Mama let me help make pasta. And I set the table all by myself. It looks beautiful, he said, admiring the slightly crooked placement of forks and napkins. These are for you. Her face lit up as she accepted the daisies. They're perfect. I'm going to put them in water right now. She dashed off, leaving him standing in the entryway. The apartment smelled of garlic and tomatoes, and something baking, warm, inviting scents that reminded him of Sunday dinners in Leah's old apartment years ago. Leah appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She looked healthier than she had in weeks. Her color returned, her movements no longer carrying the edge of exhaustion. Hi, she said, a hint of shyness in her greeting. Hi, he replied, suddenly feeling like a teenager on a first date. These are for you. She accepted the flowers with a small smile. Thank you. Dinner's almost ready. The meal was simple. Pasta with homemade sauce, a salad, fresh bread. But it was the most satisfying food Elias had eaten in years. Amira dominated the conversation, sharing stories from school, demonstrating her latest dance moves, and asking Elias endless questions about his childhood. Did you have a dog when you were little like me? She asked, twirling pasta on her fork. I did, he said, a golden retriever named Max. I want a dog, she sighed dramatically. But Mama says our apartment is too small. It is, Leah confirmed, but maybe someday. When we have a house? Amira asked hopefully. Leah and Elias exchanged a glance, both caught off guard by the casual "we" that implied a shared future. After dinner, Amira insisted on showing Elias her latest art project, then begged him to play the piano with her. The small keyboard in the corner of the living room had been a gift from him, replacing the toy version she'd outgrown. "Play the song, Mama," Amira requested. "The one you wrote." Leah hesitated, then moved to the keyboard. Her fingers found the familiar melody of "By Your Side." But this time, instead of the lullaby version Amira knew, she played it as it had originally been written, a jazz ballad with complex harmonies and a bridge that spoke of love and longing. Elias sat transfixed as Leah began to sing softly, her voice richer and more nuanced than he remembered. The lyrics washed over him, words about standing beside someone through darkness, about finding light in another person's eyes, about promises meant to be kept. When she finished, the apartment was quiet, except for the distant sounds of the city. Amira had fallen asleep on the couch, curled up with the contentment of a child, surrounded by safety and love. "That was beautiful," Elias said quietly. "I'd forgotten how talented you are." "I haven't played it that way in years," Leah admitted. "Not since I left," he finished for her. She nodded, her fingers still resting on the keys. It felt good to play it again. Something shifted between them in that moment, a thawing of the final layer of ice that had kept them at a careful distance. Leah smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes and reminded Elias of the woman he'd fallen in love with years ago. "Do you remember that night at Birdland?" she asked, "when the power went out in the middle of my set?" Elias laughed softly. "And you kept singing in the dark while I held up my phone for light. And then everyone in the audience did the same," she continued, her eyes bright with the memory. "The whole club lit up with little points of light. It was magical," he said, "like stars indoors." They exchanged stories as they cleaned up the kitchen together, remembering concerts and late-night diners, inside jokes and shared dreams. They laughed, cautiously at first, then with increasing ease, like people relearning a language they'd once been fluent in. When the dishes were done and the kitchen spotless, Elias gently lifted the still sleeping Amira from the couch. "I'll put her to bed," he offered. Leah nodded, watching as he carried their daughter down the hall with practiced care. He settled Amira in her bed, removed her shoes, and pulled the covers up around her shoulders. She stirred slightly but didn't wake, instinctively turning toward him as he brushed a strand of hair from her face. When he returned to the living room, Leah was standing by the window, looking out at the city lights. She turned as he approached. "Thank you for tonight," he said. "For dinner. For everything." "It was nice," she admitted. "Almost like a family," he finished when she hesitated. "Yes." The word was soft, but certain. Elias took a breath, gathering courage. "Leah, I know I have no right to ask this, but is there any chance for us? Not just as Amira's parents, but as us?" She didn't answer immediately, weighing her words carefully. "I don't know, Elias. There's so much history between us, so much hurt." "I understand," he said, trying to hide his disappointment. "But," she continued, "I'm starting to remember why I fell in love with you in the first place. And the man I see now, the one who fixes leaky sinks and sits through dance recitals and sings off-key lullabies, that man I could trust again, eventually." Hope bloomed in his chest, tentative but real. "I can wait," he said, "for as long as it takes." She smiled, a small private smile. You've changed. For the better, I hope. Definitely for the better. She walked him to the door, pausing before opening it. You know, I used to think about what kind of father you would have been. In those early years with Amira, when everything was so hard. And? He asked, barely breathing. Leah looked up at him, her eyes soft, with an emotion he hadn't seen directed at him in years. You could have been a good father, Elias. The past tense stung, but he understood its truth. He had missed those early years, those first steps and words, the foundation of Amira's life. But perhaps not all was lost. Maybe I still can be, he said quietly. She held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded. Maybe you can. As he walked down the steps of the building with the red door, Elias felt lighter than he had in years. The path ahead was uncertain, the wounds of the past, not fully healed. But for the first time since he'd heard a little girl singing on a subway train, he believed in the possibility of redemption, not just through words or money or grand gestures, but through the quiet, consistent acts of love that built a family day by day. Summer arrived with a heat that shimmered off the pavement and turned the subway platforms into saunas. By then, Elias had become a fixture in Leah and Amira's life, not yet living with them, but present almost daily, his careful persistence slowly rebuilding trust that had once seemed irreparably broken. The calendar on Leah's refrigerator now featured events marked with his name. Amira's recital, Elias attending, park with E, dinner, all three. Small notations that mapped the integration of their lives. They hadn't told Amira the truth yet, but the groundwork was being laid, one shared moment at a time. Then came the letter from Amira's school about the summer showcase. She'd been practicing for weeks, perfecting her audition piece for the lead solo. Her voice had grown stronger under the tutelage of Elias's Juilliard connection, her natural talent blossoming with proper instruction. When she sang, even strangers stopped to listen. Elias was there the afternoon the rejection came. He watched Amira's face crumple as she read the carefully worded letter. They picked Madison instead, she said, her voice small. I don't understand. Ms. Wilson said my audition was perfect. Leah took the letter, her expression darkening as she read between the carefully crafted lines. Let me talk to your teacher tomorrow. But Amira, with a child's intuition for adult evasions, pressed further. Is it because I'm not good enough? No, baby, Leah said firmly. You're more than good enough. Then why? Amira's eyes filled with tears. I practiced every day. Elias knelt beside her chair, his heart breaking at her confusion. Sometimes people make decisions for reasons that have nothing to do with talent or hard work. What reasons? She asked. Leah and Elias exchanged a look over her head, a silent communication between parents facing one of childhood's inevitable injustices. I think, Leah said carefully, that sometimes people have a certain picture in their minds of what things should look like, and sometimes they have trouble seeing beyond that picture. You mean because I don't look like Madison? Amira's perception cut straight to the truth. Madison Parker was blonde and blue-eyed, the daughter of the school board president. That might be part of it, Leah admitted, never one to shield Amira from difficult realities. But that doesn't make it right. Elias felt rage building in his chest, a protective fury he'd never experienced before. He wanted to storm into the school, demand justice, use his name and influence to force them to reconsider. The impulse was visceral, primal, a father's instinct to shield his child from pain. "I'm going to speak with the principal tomorrow," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "This is unacceptable." "And say what?" Leah asked quietly after Amira had gone to her room. "That they should give her the solo because you're Elias Ward and you demand it?" "If necessary," he replied. "I have connections on the board. I could—" "What?" Leah interrupted. "Force them to put her on stage? Make her the token diversity selection? How would that help her in the long run?" His anger deflated slightly. "Then what do we do? Just let her think she wasn't good enough?" "No," Leah said, her expression shifting from resignation to determination. "We show her, and them, what they're missing. Don't fight for her pride, Elias. Help her show them." The words resonated with him, a challenge that spoke to the man he was becoming rather than the man he had been. The old Elias would have made calls, leveraged influence, forced a solution through power and privilege. But that approach would only reinforce the very system that had rejected Amira in the first place. "What did you have in mind?" he asked. The idea came to him that night as he drove home, passing the subway station where he'd first heard Amira sing. A memory surfaced. Leah performing years ago in a community concert series that brought music to public spaces around the city. What if they created something similar? Not a school showcase with its politics and prejudices, but something authentic, accessible to everyone. He called Leah as soon as he reached his penthouse. "What if we organize a concert? In the subway station where I first heard her sing." There was a pause on the line. "The 86th Street station?" "Yes. We could invite local musicians, make it a community event. Let Amira perform the piece she prepared, but on her own terms, in a place where everyone can hear her." Another pause, longer this time. "That's actually a beautiful idea." The next morning, they presented the plan to Amira over breakfast. Her initial disappointment gave way to excitement as they described their vision. Not just a solo performance, but a celebration of community music, with her at its center. "And I can sing any song I want?" she asked, hope returning to her eyes. "Any song," Leah confirmed. "What would you choose?" Amira didn't hesitate. "By your side, the way you taught me, Mama." The planning consumed the next 2 weeks. Elias secured the necessary permits, navigating city bureaucracy with the same determination he once applied to business deals. Leah reached out to musician friends from her jazz club days, assembling a small ensemble to accompany Amira. Together, they distributed flyers throughout the neighborhood, posted on community boards, and spread the word through social media. What began as a simple showcase for Amira expanded into something larger, a celebration of the neighborhood's diverse talents. A string quartet from the local high school volunteered to perform. An elderly violinist who played in the subway for tips asked to join. A gospel choir from the church around the corner offered to sing. The event took on a life of its own, growing from a parent's gesture of support into a genuine community gathering. The evening of the concert arrived warm and clear. Elias arrived early to help set up the small sound system and chairs they'd arranged for elderly attendees. The subway platform had been transformed. Strings of lights hung from the ceiling, creating a warm glow that softened the industrial surroundings. A makeshift stage area had been marked off, with the tracks and tunnel creating a natural backdrop. People began to gather. First a few curious onlookers, then regular commuters pausing on their way home, then intentional attendees who had seen the flyers. By 7 o'clock, the platform was filled with a diverse crowd that reflected the true face of New York. Every age, race, and background represented, united by the universal language of music. Leah arrived with Amira just before the concert was set to begin. The girl wore a new dress, not pink this time, but a deep blue that complemented her skin tone and made her eyes shine. Her hair had been styled in intricate braids, adorned with small silver clips that caught the light when she moved. She looked nervous, but determined, clutching her mother's hand as they navigated through the crowd. When she saw Elias, her face lit up. "Mr. E, there are so many people." "All here to hear you sing," he said, kneeling to her level. "Are you ready?" She nodded solemnly. "I practiced extra hard." "You're going to be amazing," he assured her, "just like the first time I heard you on this very platform." The concert began with the string quartet, their classical melodies floating through the unusual acoustic space of the subway station. The elderly violinist followed, playing folk tunes that had passengers stopping on the stairs to listen. The gospel choir's powerful harmonies drew spontaneous applause that echoed off the tiled walls. Throughout it all, Elias watched Amira's face, her concentration, her appreciation of the other performers, her growing confidence as she prepared for her moment. Leah stood beside her, one hand resting protectively on her shoulder, whispering occasional encouragement in her ear. Finally, it was Amira's turn. Leah stepped forward to introduce her, her voice clear and strong. "Our final performer tonight is my daughter, Amira Brooks. She'll be singing a song called By Your Side, which has special meaning for our family." This song began as a private melody between two people who loved each other, became a lullaby for a little girl, and tonight becomes something that belongs to all of us. She stepped back, and Amira took her place at the center of the makeshift stage. The crowd quieted, the usual subway noises fading to a distant hum. For a moment, Amira looked small and vulnerable under the improvised spotlight. Then she took a deep breath, lifted her chin with the same slight tilt Elias recognized from her mother, and began to sing. The first notes were soft, almost tentative, but they carried through the station with surprising clarity. As she continued, her voice grew stronger, more confident, filling the space with a purity that silenced even the most distracted passers-by. The song, once a private expression of love between Elias and Leah, then a bedtime comfort for a child, transformed again into something universal that spoke to everyone present. Elias found himself moving closer to Leah as Amira sang. Without conscious thought, his hand sought hers in the dim light. Their fingers intertwined, a physical connection that mirrored the emotional one being rewoven through their daughter's voice. He glanced at Leah and saw tears streaming silently down her face. Not tears of sadness or regret, but of pride and wonder at the child they had created together. His own eyes burned with emotion as he watched Amira, her small figure commanding the attention of hundreds of strangers who had stopped their journeys to listen. In the crowd, he spotted familiar faces, Amira's music teacher, neighbors from their building, even a few of his colleagues who had come to support this new chapter of his life. And there, at the back, stood Ms. Wilson, Amira's school teacher, her expression a mixture of surprise and something that looked like regret. As Amira reached the final verse, her voice soared through the station, echoing off the walls and down the tunnels. The melody that had once been a secret between lovers had become a public declaration, a testament to resilience and the healing power of music. When the final note faded, there was a moment of perfect silence. That rare, magical pause, when a city known for its constant motion collectively held its breath. Then the applause began, thunderous and immediate, reverberating through the station like a physical force. People stood, cheered, wiped away tears. Strangers turned to each other with knowing smiles, bound together by the shared experience of unexpected beauty in an ordinary place. Amira's face broke into a radiant smile as she took a small, graceful bow. Her eyes searched the crowd until she found Elias and Leah, still standing hand in hand. She ran to them, throwing her arms around both their waists in a single embrace. "Did you hear them?" she asked breathlessly. "They liked it." "They loved it," Leah corrected, kneeling to hug her properly. "I'm so proud of you." "As am I," Elias added, his voice thick with emotion. "You were extraordinary." The crowd began to disperse, though many lingered to congratulate Amira or thank the organizers. Ms. Wilson approached cautiously, offering sincere praise and what sounded like the beginning of an apology. Leah accepted it with gracious dignity, neither seeking nor offering recriminations. As the impromptu stage was dismantled and the subway station gradually returned to its normal state, Amira tugged on Elias's sleeve. He bent down to hear her over the renewed sounds of trains and announcements. "Thank you for doing this for me," she said, her expression serious beyond her years. "You're welcome," he replied, "but you did all the hard work. You're the one who sang so beautifully." She shook her head. "But you made it happen. Mama says sometimes when people don't see your light, you have to make your own spotlight." "Your mother is very wise," he said, smiling at Leah over Amira's head. "I know why I can sing that song so well," Amira continued, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Why's that?" "Because when I sing about being by someone's side, I think about you and Mama. You're my reason." The simple statement, delivered with a child's unfiltered honesty, struck Elias with the force of revelation. All the wealth he'd accumulated, the power he'd wielded, the status he'd achieved, none of it compared to being this little girl's reason. In that moment, he understood what true success meant. As they walked together toward the subway exit, Amira between them holding both their hands, Elias caught Leah's eye. The look they exchanged contained volumes, shared pride in their daughter, appreciation for how far they'd come, and perhaps the promise of where they might go together. The subway concert had begun as a response to rejection, a parent's attempt to soothe a child's wounded pride. It had become something far more profound, a public reclamation of their family story, a symbolic return to the place where their paths had crossed again after years of separation. In the same station where a sad man had once heard a little girl sing a forgotten melody, a family had found its voice. 5 years passed, like a train gathering speed, moments blurring together, punctuated by stations of significance. The night Elias finally told Amira he was her father, tears, questions, then a fierce hug that seemed to last for hours. The day Leah accepted his proposal for a second time, on the same subway platform where their reunion began. Their intimate wedding in Central Park with Amira as their only attendant, proudly carrying rings and singing a blessing she had composed herself. Now, on a crisp autumn morning, sunlight streamed through the windows of their brownstone in Brooklyn, a home purchased not for status but for the yard where their rescue dog could play, for the space to host community gatherings, for the music room with perfect acoustics where Leah taught lessons and Amira practiced for hours. Elias moved through the kitchen, preparing breakfast with the ease of a man who had found his rhythm in domestic life. At 43, he looked younger than he had at 38, the lines of stress around his eyes replaced by laugh lines. His posture relaxed rather than rigidly controlled. He wore jeans and a sweater, the tailored suits relegated to the back of his closet, only emerging for the occasional board meeting of the Ward Community Arts Foundation. The foundation had been his rebirth, a way to transform the fortune he'd accumulated into something meaningful. It funded music and art programs in underserved schools, provided scholarships to talented students, regardless of background, and maintained a series of community performance spaces throughout the city. His business acumen now served a different purpose, creating sustainability for programs that changed lives rather than merely generating profit. Leah entered the kitchen, her cropped hair now streaked with elegant silver that complemented her warm brown skin. At 41, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of a woman who had found her place in the world, teaching music at a prestigious arts high school while performing regularly at select venues. Her albums, once a dream deferred, now garnered critical acclaim and a devoted following. "Is she up yet?" Leah asked, accepting the coffee Elias handed her. "I heard the shower running," he replied. "She's nervous about today." "She shouldn't be. The song is beautiful." "Try telling her that." Elias smiled. 12-year-olds aren't known for their rational responses to parental reassurance. Leah laughed, the sound still capable of making his heart skip after all these years. "True. But this isn't just any performance. It's personal for her." He nodded, understanding completely. Today marked the 5th anniversary of the Subway concert that had changed everything. The moment when rejection had transformed into triumph, when a community had gathered to hear a little girl sing. To commemorate the occasion, the Ward Foundation was hosting a celebration at the same station, featuring performances by many of the original participants and new artists who had benefited from the Foundation's programs. Amira had insisted on premiering an original composition, her first public performance of a song she had written entirely herself. She had worked on it in secret for months, allowing neither parent to hear it before today. Footsteps thundered down the stairs, and Amira burst into the kitchen, no longer the small girl in a pink dress, but a lanky preteen with her mother's expressive eyes and her father's determined chin. Her hair was styled in long braids with blue beads that matched her carefully chosen outfit. "I can't find my notebook with the final lyrics," she announced, her voice edged with panic. "I've looked everywhere." "Check the piano bench," Leah suggested calmly. "That's where you were working last night." Amira dashed off again, returning moments later with the notebook clutched triumphantly. "Found it. Dad, are you still okay to play accompaniment?" "As long as you don't mind your old man cramping your style," Elias teased. She rolled her eyes with the practiced exasperation of early adolescence, but her smile betrayed her. "You'll do fine. Just remember the key change in the bridge." "Yes, maestro," he said with a mock bow. They ate breakfast together, the conversation flowing easily between them. Leah's upcoming masterclass, Elias's new community center project, Amira's science project on sound waves. The family they had become felt both miraculous and ordinary, the daily rhythms of their life together, a testament to how much had changed. The 86th Street station had been transformed once again for the anniversary celebration. This time, with the Foundation's resources behind it, the makeshift stage had been replaced by a proper performance area, the improvised lighting upgraded to professional equipment. Yet, the spirit remained the same. A community gathering in an unconventional space, music bringing together people who might otherwise pass each other without a glance. The event had drawn a substantial crowd, including many who had attended the original concert. Ms. Wilson was there, now a vocal advocate for arts education equity. Madison Parker, the girl who had received the solo that sparked it all, attended with her family, now a friend of Amira's through their shared love of music. Even Elias's parents had come, their initial resistance to his life choices gradually softening as they witnessed his happiness and Amira's undeniable talent. The program unfolded with the same joyful energy as the original concert. The high school string quartet, now college music majors, returned to perform. The elderly violinist, still playing despite arthritis in his hands, received a standing ovation. The gospel choir had expanded, their harmonies filling the station with transcendent sound. Throughout the performances, Elias watched Amira in the wings, her expression shifting between concentration and nervousness as she prepared for her moment. Leah stood beside her, offering quiet reassurance, while Elias waited at the piano that had been brought in for the occasion. When it was finally time, Amira stepped onto the stage with the poise of someone much older. The audience quieted as she adjusted the microphone. 5 years ago, I stood in this station and sang a song my mother wrote, she began, her voice steady despite her nerves. I was 7 years old, and I didn't understand then how that moment would change my life. Today, I'd like to share a new song I've written called The Train That Stopped. It's about how sometimes the journey you think you're on isn't the one that matters most. Elias took his place at the piano, catching Leah's eye in the front row. As his fingers found the opening chords, Amira began to sing. The song was remarkable, sophisticated beyond her years, with lyrics that spoke of interrupted journeys becoming unexpected destinations, of silence giving way to music, of love that persisted despite wrong turns and missed connections. The chorus returned to the image of a train stopping at an unscheduled station, allowing passengers who were meant to find each other to reconnect. As Elias played the accompaniment, he marveled at his daughter's talent, not just her voice, which had grown stronger and more nuanced with training, but her ability to distill complex emotions into melody and verse. She had inherited Leah's musical gift and, perhaps, his own facility with structure and pattern. But the result was uniquely Amira, a perfect synthesis of her parents, yet entirely her own creation. The final verse spoke directly to forgiveness and second chances, with a maturity that brought tears to many eyes in the audience. Some trains are meant to be missed, so we can catch the one that brings us home. Some silence needs to be broken by the voice we've known all along. When the song ended, the applause was immediate and overwhelming. Amira's face lit up with the pure joy of artistic expression received and understood. She took a small bow, then gestured to Elias at the piano, including him in her moment of triumph. As the celebration wound down and the station gradually returned to its normal function, the Ward Brooks family made their way home through streets gilded by late afternoon sunlight. Amira walked between her parents, occasionally skipping with residual excitement from her performance. Everyone loved your song, Leah said, pride evident in her voice. Mr. Hernandez from Juilliard's pre-college division wants to talk to you about their composition program. Really? Amira's eyes widened. Do you think I'm good enough? More than good enough, Elias assured her. But only if it's what you want. I think it is, she said thoughtfully. When I'm writing music, it feels like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, the city humming around them, car horns and conversations, street musicians and construction, the thousand sounds that composed New York's endless symphony. Amira reached for both their hands, swinging their arms slightly as they walked, momentarily a child again, despite her growing independence. Dad, she asked suddenly, are you glad you left your old job? Do you ever miss it? Elias considered the question seriously. I miss certain aspects of it. The challenge, sometimes. The clarity of knowing exactly what success looked like. He paused. But no, I don't regret changing course. What I do now matters in a different way. Because you help people? Yes. and because it allows me to be present for the things that truly matter." He squeezed her hand gently. "I used to think money built my legacy. Turns out, it was you." Amira smiled, leaning against his side briefly as they walked. "I'm glad you got on that train that day." "So am I," he said softly. "It was the best wrong turn I ever took." Leah caught his eye over their daughter's head, her expression full of the quiet understanding that had grown between them. The knowledge that their journey, with all its detours and delays, had brought them exactly where they needed to be. As they approached their brownstone, the setting sun painted the brick facade with warm golden light. Through the windows they could see their dog waiting eagerly, tail wagging at their approach. The sight of home, not just the physical structure, but the life they had built within it, filled Elias with profound gratitude. 5 years ago, he had been a successful but hollow man, riding a subway to nowhere, trapped in the silence of his own making. Now he walked through Brooklyn with his family, surrounded by the music of everyday life. Amira's animated chatter about her performance, Leah's thoughtful questions, the rhythm of their footsteps in perfect sync. That night, after Amira had gone to bed, Elias and Leah sat on their small back patio, sharing a glass of wine under the stars, barely visible through the city's light pollution. "She was magnificent today," Leah said. "That song, I couldn't have written something that insightful at twice her age." "She has her mother's talent," Elias replied. "And her father's heart," Leah added, taking his hand. "Though you tried to hide it for a while." He smiled, acknowledging the truth in her gentle teasing. "I'm still making up for lost time." "No," she said, her expression serious. "We're not making up for anything anymore. We're just living our life, the one we have now. The past is just the track that brought us here." The wisdom in her words settled over him like a blessing. She was right, as she so often was about the things that mattered most. They had moved beyond regret and redemption to something more sustainable, a present built on acceptance, and a future unlimited by the constraints of old wounds. The next morning, as they went about their routines, Leah preparing for classes, Amira gathering homework, Elias reviewing grant proposals for the foundation, the familiar sounds of the subway rumbled beneath the city streets. Trains continued their endless journeys, carrying strangers whose lives might intersect in ways they couldn't imagine. Somewhere on those trains, perhaps another story was beginning, another moment of recognition, another chance at connection. But this particular story, of a poor black girl who sang to an unhappy millionaire on the subway, not knowing he was her dad, had found its resolution. The train that had once carried silence now carried song, a melody that would continue through Amira's compositions, through the lives touched by the foundation's work, through the love that had found its way home, despite every obstacle. It was the sound of a family whole, at last, the rhythm of belonging that beat beneath the noise of the world, steady as the tracks that had brought them together again.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's easier and more intriguing as you watch the next one.